We had a several $100,000 Lightfish right up next to a Chinese Type 55 destroyer in the Pacific between Guam and the Philippines last year. That cost differential was about a $900 million ship with around 300 sailors to a couple hundred thousand with 0 people on board. I'm Mike Flanigan. I'm one of the co-founders and the CEO here at Seasats. And at Seasats, we make autonomous surface vessels or robotic boats. We work on maritime autonomy. This is one of the vehicles that we build, the Lightfish. It's a long-range autonomous surface vessel, or ASV. And yeah, these are our main production vehicles, our flagship product.
The Lightfish uncrewed surface vessel completed the first autonomous transit of the Taiwan Strait, one of the world's most contested waterways. What happened during the mission?
Yeah, it was pretty exciting. It is, a historic and world first in terms of autonomous vehicles or USVs, like doing something like this. And the Taiwan Strait in particular is a very interesting part of the world because it's the body of water that separates China from Taiwan. And it's typically considered both a very contested place in terms of maritime traffic. It's very busy in terms of commercial traffic, and it has pretty significant sea states, storms, and serious weather. It's a major, very challenging and important part of the maritime environment.
What Lightfish capabilities enabled that mission to happen?
Yeah, some of the things that are really unique about what we do about here at Seasats, and particularly with the Lightfish, is one, the mission range. It was well over 1,000 nautical miles. So this vessel, which is about 12 feet long or 4 meters, was able to transit under its own power for the entire range of the mission. Also, its endurance. This was a mission that lasted many weeks, counting start to finish. It spent a handful of days in the strait itself. And because of that, there are very few vehicles that can operate autonomously for that type of endurance. So the missions that we focus on with the Lightfish are really persistent sensing, persistent surveillance type missions. And this mission through the Taiwan Strait embodied that. I mean, we had a Lightfish going out under its own power, communicating under a variety of communications, sensing the environment, tracking interesting events and other traffic. And also, I would say the ruggedness, because of the high sea states, we did encounter big winds and big seas, breaking waves. And in that, the vehicle is actually very ruggedized and able to handle those conditions, which is pretty unique. A lot of vehicles are designed for shorter, faster missions, whereas we really build rugged, kind of marathon type vehicles that can go out into the ocean for long periods of time.
For viewers who don't follow the Taiwan Strait, could you break down what's happening on a day-to-day basis in that strait?
Hmm. Yeah, it's a good question. Well, one, there's an enormous amount of commercial activity. It's a huge hub for the world because there's a massive commercial industry in Taiwan, and the shipping throughout the Asia and Indo-Pacific region and through and around the Taiwan Strait is enormous, a large volume of ships, similar to some of the other important maritime choke points around the world. One of the other factors that's really important and just globally very relevant in the Taiwan Strait is that China has a very aggressive maritime stance. So they have pushed out their claimed territorial waters throughout really the Pacific region there. They've been encroaching on the Philippines, around Taiwan, even pushing up against Japan, Vietnam. So really, China has taken a very expansionist, pretty aggressive maritime stance where they're often pushing both their Navy, their Coast Guard, and really their kind of commercial fishing militia presence, encroaching and infringing on other countries' waters. So Taiwan in particular, both their EEZ or exclusive economic zone, and then their 12 nautical mile territorial waters. China routinely does both gray zone operations, meaning day-to-day infringements, as well as very public military operations right up to and into Taiwan's waters, really pushing and threatening their own sovereignty.
Could you break down EEZ and gray zone operations?
Yeah, EEZ is typically the longer range, typically 200 nautical miles of waterways that countries have rights over in terms of economic activities. In areas like in the Pacific with Taiwan, China, the Philippines, where you have multiple countries overlapping EEZs, then it starts, usually they push up against each other and there's an agreed upon UN or international boundary of, hey, this is one country's rights for fishing, this is where the next country's rights starts. Where you end up with trouble is, like for example, China has asserted due to some very ancient history that they have vastly extended EEZ rights beyond many other countries' territories. Those claims have generally been rejected by the international community because they're very expansionist, and that threatens both the fishing, the shipping, the economic activities of Taiwan and some of these other maritime nations.
Lightfish encountered multiple Chinese warships. What did that reveal about China's presence in the strait, and what warships did Lightfish encounter?
Yeah, it did. The whitefish that was out there had several interactions with some Chinese warships, and it just showed that they're there. This is not a hypothetical, a theoretical. It comes up in Western media occasionally where there's a big Chinese military operation, and we say like, oh, right then for those couple of days there was a Chinese presence around Taiwan. The reality is it's happening almost every day. I mean, basically on we did this mission, we sailed through commercially, and while there, we monitored and picked up on the signals and the position and positive imagery of both a Chinese type 056 corvette, one of their military ships, as well as another vessel that was working presumably more of a supply support role for the Chinese Navy. Really right on Taiwan's doorstep. And they were there for multiple days that we were able to track and see their positions.
Chinese ships were not transmitting AIS. Why is that operationally significant?
Yeah, it's important because many navies warships communicate in a more controlled manner. They're not necessarily sharing their positions on commercial traffic. So if you're doing your intelligence collection just on what we expect ships to share voluntarily, then you're missing a lot of the picture. So these warships, and this is common, for U.S. and many other warships, when they're in places that are contested, they're not sharing their position openly. So that's where the Lightfish is able to pick up, both with its antennas, with its radar, with its cameras, the positions of ships, whether or not they're telling everyone where they are. And so that's important for any country looking to protect their maritime borders. Like, it starts with knowing who's there, when they're there, where they're at.
What does Lightfish see differently compared to a satellite, aircraft, cruise ship, drone?
It's a great question. For satellites, if you know where to look, you can zoom way in with a straw and look. But also, it only happens typically once. There are some geostationary satellites, but a lot of times for the more widely available satellites, every couple hours you can look in and grab a snapshot of a specific spot. You could look at a port or in a dock and say, hey, is there a ship there or not? But if you don't know where to look, like looking for ships off the coast of Taiwan, then it's tough because you're flying over and you can really only aim the camera once or twice and look in a very narrow swath. The Lightfish lets you stay in one area and monitor a bubble continuously at very high resolution. So you can place these out there, and for a number of nautical miles, you can say, hey, we have continuous monitoring of the border of our EEZ. For example, China sent their long-range fishing fleet and pushed into Argentinian waters a few years ago. And recently they were going and doing the same thing with Peru. They went near the Galapagos. They kind of have this history of going and doing some aggressive fishing inside of other countries' boundaries. When they do that, the only way to know that they're there is oftentimes to actually send out crewed ships, like large Navy ships or Coast Guard ships, or to fly planes, which gives you a brief look or a very high cost look. With robots with no people on them and very small, we can put them out there and they can stay there for a long period of time and monitor continuously at very high resolution.
And Ukraine showed naval drones can challenge a larger fleet. What lessons carry over potentially to Taiwan, and what lessons don't?
I think a lot of lessons do. One of the big takeaways that we have heard, both throughout history and even right now, some politicians say is, oh, Russia's a really big country, much bigger than Ukraine, or, oh, China's a really big country, much bigger than Taiwan. That means that, this big country is going to win. Well, technology flips that on its head. The countries and the groups that are able to leverage technology effectively can have an outsized effect. So Ukraine in the Black Sea was able to push back the Russian Navy beyond anyone's expectations, to the point where it's pretty well established that the Ukrainians have significant control over the Black Sea, despite not having a standing, really traditional, proper Navy. They've done that through USVs and through technology. I would say for Taiwan, there's a very similar equation for them to have when they're thinking about how do they deter and how would they potentially defend against aggression from China.
Mhm.
Technology is very much the answer. If you If you don't leverage technology, then you're putting lives at risk. And like we see in the Ukrainian front lines, they're leveraging technology as much as they can to keep their own people off the front line and try to leverage technology.
Beyond the Taiwan Strait, where does Seasats fit in into the broader Indo-Pacific strategy?
Yeah, the Indo-Pacific has some unique challenges compared to maybe the Black Sea or even the Red Sea or like in the Strait of Hormuz. The Indo-Pacific has a unique operating characteristic that it's massive. It's so large, and the sea states are so significant, and the typhoons can be really significant that a question of how do you operate from islands, like Guam and the Philippines and these different far flung areas, oftentimes potentially with minimal support chains, to really operate in this like contested maritime theater. Seasats is a natural fit for that because our vehicles are very self sustaining. They're designed for rugged environments. Like the surface of the ocean is at times, many space engineers say, that the ocean is actually more hostile than space. Space, you need to get up there, but once you're there, it's a temperatures game. The surface of the ocean is corrosive. It's constantly changing. You get massive storms. It's very variable. So we've designed vehicles to operate for a long time in the ocean. That fits for the Indo-Pacific, which is largely a maritime domain. Aerial vehicles, which are great for height of eye and speed. Their range, oftentimes for small drones, is quite small. So you end up seeing a lot of mixed, like maritime plus aerial or subsea domain type operations and missions.
What do you think that maritime architecture will look like in the Indo-Pacific in terms of ROVs, USVs, larger autonomous ships, and where does Seasats fit in there?
I think you'll see a whole system of systems, and potentially, uh, really like at Seasats, we're a very tactical, functional, get stuff done type company. So it's like anything that works. So we're very fast iteration, deliver things quickly. So we build systems like the Lightfish, our quick fish, our heavy fish, designed for long range, enduring operations. I think that you will see mixes of subsea vehicles. We've deployed UUVs off of the Lightfish before. You'll see mixes of aerial vehicles. We've launched small drones out of Lightfish and Quickfish. Um, I think large ships will play a role too in terms of moving cargo and equipment in peacetime operations. I generally think that small things are better because they're less like what we're seeing in the world is like big things become expensive targets. So the smaller and more proliferated is almost where all technology goes. I mean, smartphones and compute, everything gets smaller, more cost effective, more spread out. That gives you more resiliency. So we're all about packing a lot of value into small form factor systems and then building a lot of them.
Could you talk about the economics of maritime warfare and how it's shifting?
Yeah, I mean, it's just a dramatic example of technology disruption. So I'll actually contrast this with the air on the air side. On the air side, you see, $1,000 FPV drone taking out multi-million-dollar tanks. That's a huge cost benefit equipment and life asymmetry going on. In maritime, you see the same thing, but the volumes are lower, but the cost structures are higher. So it's just as impactful. For example, we had, several $100,000 Lightfish right up next to a Chinese Type 55 destroyer in the Pacific off of, between Guam and the Philippines last year. That cost differential was about a $900 million ship with around 300 sailors to a couple 100,000 with 0 people on board. That means that the disruption in terms of the risk factor there is just massive. And we're talking about 100x differentials in terms of equipment, resources, and the speed that we can build these and that you can build them around the world versus the speed that you can build a multi-100-foot ship. It's just, they're hard to compare. You're talking about huge multi-order of magnitude disruptions here in terms of maritime warfare.
And we heard the Department of War talk about drones being the threat of a lifetime in terms of aerial UAS. Do you see the same demand signals in naval drones right now?
Yes, absolutely. Both drones and the software driving them, the AI. I mean, a lot of people, we like to say, we like to make products that are simple for the end user. That means that we've packed a lot of complexity into it, just like smartphones. They're intuitive, they're easy to use. It doesn't mean they're simple. They're packed with technology. So the rate of change on AI software, the types of compute and things that we can do with these vessels, I would say that AI and robotics and drones are the threat of a lifetime. I mean, and really like for us in the United States, we need to be very cognizant about wanting to adopt these systems because it's radically disruptive, and we should want our troops having them.
And what feedback are you taking from CENTCOM and what's going on in the Strait right now?
Um, it's an evolving and dynamic situation. I would say that we are seeing with Iran that, once again, small country, big country, the expected traditional outcomes are not necessarily what's happening. The Iranians have been very good about leveraging Shaheds and developing drone technology and being able to impose asymmetric threats. So shutting down the Strait of Hormuz, small boats, a couple of mines, low-cost missiles, USVs, UAVs. These are thorny problems. It's not something that we can just blink or wish away. It's like you need to grapple with the fact that, unfortunately, I would say, like for the peacetime of societies around the world, the asymmetric threat greatly benefits offensive attacks. For countries defending their territories, that's a benefit because, like the Ukrainians, they're fighting offensively, but against an invader. Just anywhere, it's like these low-cost systems are really disrupting how we protect societies, and like they're very hard to stop. It's not enough to stop them. You need to do it in a way that's not going to bleed out your economy economically.
The world has a lot of maritime choke points.
Sure does. Yep, and we rely a lot on freedom of navigation, shipping, the fact that we can generally take it for granted that you can load up cars, food, goods, and put them on a container ship and get them safely from LA to anywhere else in the world. It turns out there's a lot that goes into establishing that freedom of navigation.
And could you break down what we're seeing here with the Lightfish in terms of radar, camera, the stats?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're looking at kind of the Lightfish here, the main vehicle. We're seeing solar panels on top. So these are what recharge the vessel for long periods of time at sea. Inside, it has a generator that helps it operate when there's bad weather or high-powered payload operations. We're seeing a front sensor mast here, so a radar prominently on top that helps the vessel see very far to other vessels and spot ships many miles out. There's a camera on the front. There's also quite a few cameras embedded into the back of the system, so it's looking with machine learning and AI unblinkingly all around so that if there's a ship on the horizon, it spots that and communicates it back. There's a variety of communication devices, antennas that you'll see, so the vessel can communicate back important information that it sees in real time or near real time. You also notice just the hull shape. This is a composite vehicle, so quite lightweight. A couple of the things, there's handles. You'll notice this is a relatively small dolly. So all of this is actually extremely portable, which is really unique. Most of the vehicles there are other vehicles in the world that could do a 1,000-mile mission. They're like 30 or 50 feet long. They're huge vessels. This is about 12 feet long, a couple 100 pounds. Three of us would be a little bit heavy, but we could get it into the water, just the three of us. In fact, if we had a nice smooth ramp, I've launched these by myself quite a few times, and then it could sail across an ocean, or it could go monitor your port for months without needing maintenance. So those are some of the unique capabilities that we packed into the Lightfish.
Could you break down the future plans for Seasats?
Yeah, this is, what we've done to date with the Lightfish and with our customers and operations around the world is pretty remarkable. I'd say we're proving what's possible today operationally, really around the world. We've been on every inhabited continent and deployed globally. The future is just as exciting, if not more so, because we started in a beachhead. We knew that these persistent sensing missions and surveillance missions were really important. I'd say that the technology we've proven and the tech stack that powers the Lightfish, we're pushing into our quick fish and our heavy fish product lines. And those are going to be able to carry not just small sensors and more exquisite or expeditionary type missions, but really do very utility class missions. So right now with the Lightfish, we're a dual use company. We've done a lot of commercial work doing surveying, doing monitoring for water quality, subsea survey for construction. And I would say that it's pretty remarkable that we're able to deliver positive ROI to our maritime customers, not just in a military context, but even just in a straight business. Like, you need to go survey offshore, we can save you tens of thousands of dollars per day in operational costs in this small vehicle, when typically you'd be using a 50-foot utility ship. I think exciting about the future is that some of the products we're working on, like the heavy fish, that's going to be commercially game-changing. I mean, you can just fit all this standard commercial equipment. Like when you're talking about construction around ports, when you're talking about doing surveying, cables, pipelines, like there's so much work done in maritime. It is exceedingly expensive because the ocean's a hostile environment. So it's really high hazard work for maritime workers. I think that the future of autonomy is going to play a huge role in that, and we're very well situated to be a major part of it.
Ties in with the exponential growth of subsea cabling and areas like contested logistics with the Department of War.
Yep. You know, a lot of people think about like the internet and the cloud as this amorphous cloud technology. The reality is it runs on pipelines and cables and physical infrastructure. And in a lot of our world, 70% of our world is covered by water. So our ability as a species to be able to operate around the world effectively is important. Like that's never going to go away. And I would say how we do it is changing and fundamentally changing, and we can take a huge amount of cost and risk out of that equation. And so that's going to be a big deal, even as conflict goes up and down. Like the Navy work is very important. Maritime security work is important. Also, just doing work in the ocean and being responsible stewards of the environment is a pretty important part too. So it's exciting that we can play across all of these domains.
Seasats, the future of maritime security here in San Diego. Thank you, Mike.
Thanks, Nolan.